The morning of October 30th, 2025 was supposed to mark another chapter in Tanzania's proud democratic journey. Instead, it became the day the streets spoke louder than the ballots. Dar es Salaam woke up to smoke not from celebration, but from burning barricades. Across Mwanza and Dodoma, the air filled with the clash of tear gas and defiance. On this day, the country that once called itself the Island of Peace trembled under the weight of its own silence. The election that was meant to unite Tanzania instead exposed the deep cracks in its foundation. President Samia Suluhu Hassan, once praised for her calm leadership, walked into a polling station with the confidence of a leader facing no real rival, because there were none left. Her two main challengers had been jailed and disqualified, leaving the people to choose between obedience and outrage. By afternoon, that outrage exploded. Crowds stormed the streets, chanting, "No voice, no peace." Police fired live rounds. Bodies fell, and a once quiet nation began to roar. But this uprising isn't just about politics, it's about dignity. It's about ordinary citizens, men and women saying, "We have been silent for too long." It's about mothers carrying gas cylinders on their backs, not as weapons, but as symbols of survival. It's about a generation that refuses to inherit fear. And so we ask, what happens when democracy becomes a script and the people are written out of it? How far can a nation go before silence becomes rebellion? Today we take you into the heart of Tanzania's unrest, from the blackout zones, where the internet was cut, to the alleys where hope still burns. This is not just a story about a stolen election. It's about a people reclaiming their right to be seen. Stay with us. Because what's unfolding in Tanzania may just redefine Africa's struggle for truth. When Tanzanians went to the polls on October 30th, they expected a choice. Instead, they were handed a coronation. By mid-morning, reports started flooding in from Dar es Salaam and Mwanza: police blockades, missing opposition observers, journalists detained for their safety. The ruling party, Chama cha Mapinduzi CCM, the same organization that has governed since independence, had already written the script. What unfolded that day was not an election, but a performance staged to look like one. At the center of it all stood President Samia Suluhu Hassan. She arrived at her polling station smiling for the cameras, surrounded by soldiers in crisp green uniforms. Her appearance was meant to project calm authority, but outside that calm had shattered. Her two main rivals, Tandulu, leader of the People's Freedom Party, and Luhaga Mina, candidate of ACT Wazalendo, were both gone from the race. Tandulu had been jailed in April under treason charges. Luhaga Mina was disqualified on technical grounds so vague that even the Electoral Commission could not clearly explain them. 16 other minor candidates remained, but none had the machinery, the resources, or the visibility to challenge CCM's decades-long grip on power. By noon, the streets began to move. From the crowded markets of Kariakoo to the lakeside neighborhoods of Mwanza, hundreds of young people poured into the open, waving flags, chanting and demanding answers. Their cry was simple: "Where is our vote?" For a nation that has endured one-party dominance for over 60 years, this was not just protest, it was defiance. Police convoys appeared quickly. Tear gas filled the air. Gunfire echoed against the walls of shuttered shops. Videos smuggled through the blackout showed officers dragging protesters, their faces hidden under masks, their badges removed. The official media called them troublemakers. But on the ground, they were teachers, taxi drivers, students, citizens who had reached the end of patience. Then came the image that would define the day: a group of men and women storming a gas station owned by a CCM member, hauling away blue gas cylinders on their backs. They weren't looting. They were surviving. "These are our taxes," shouted one man to the cameras before the feed went dark. That line spread across radio networks and encrypted apps before the government shut them down. Cooking gas became a symbol, the people reclaiming what they believed the elite had stolen. As dusk fell, fires lit up Dar es Salaam's skyline. Government posters were ripped down, replaced with handwritten slogans demanding justice. The authorities declared a curfew and moved in the military. By midnight, the first reports of casualties appeared: 17 dead, more than 50 injured. Hospitals overflowed, and ambulances were turned back at checkpoints. Families searched for missing relatives through smoke and chaos, and yet even under blackout, communication found a way. With WhatsApp and Facebook disabled, citizens turned to Zello, a walkie-talkie app that allowed them to coordinate in real time. Volunteers used the app to guide protesters through side streets, share medical help, and record evidence before it disappeared. It was a digital heartbeat in a country where silence had become a weapon. By the next morning, the official narrative had already shifted. State television showed images of President Samia congratulating citizens on a peaceful election, while her ministers condemned foreign interference. But beyond the TV screens, the truth was undeniable. Tanzania had erupted. In Dar es Salaam, Dodoma, and the border towns of Namanga and Arusha, people continued to march despite bullets and fear. For the first time in years, the Tanzanian flag flew not as a symbol of authority, but of resistance. Because in that moment, the people realized something powerful. If they could not speak through the ballot box, they would speak through the streets. Night fell over Tanzania like a storm. The city lights flickered, then went dark, not from power cuts, but from fear. What began as spontaneous marches had now transformed into a full-scale uprising. Across Dar es Salaam, the chants grew louder. No voice, no peace. In Mwanza, burning tires turned the highways into walls of fire. In Dodoma, young people clashed with riot police armed with nothing but their voices and conviction. By midnight, the government had imposed a national curfew. Soldiers patrolled the streets with armored vehicles, declaring on loudspeakers that all unlawful assemblies would be dealt with decisively. But for many Tanzanians, this was no longer about politics. It was about existence. People broke into warehouses for food hospitals filled with the wounded, and mothers screamed the names of their missing children in the smoky night. The chaos reached its peak when police opened fire near the Kariakoo market, killing several demonstrators. Unconfirmed reports placed the death toll at over 30, with hundreds injured or detained. Despite the bloodshed, crowds refused to disperse. Women wrapped in Tanzanian flags knelt in the streets, raising their hands as bullets whizzed overhead. A man shouted, "We have no guns, only hope," a cry that spread like wildfire through the blackout. The internet shutdown had cut off traditional communication, but the people adapted. Through Zello offline mesh networks and shortwave radios, they kept the resistance alive. Students relayed real-time updates, doctors coordinated underground clinics, and ordinary citizens risked arrest to smuggle information to the outside world. Each message, each whisper, was an act of defiance. Meanwhile, state TV broadcasted a different reality. Footage of calm polling stations, smiling voters, and the president's message of unity and order. But in the background, gunfire echoed through the capital. For many watching, this disconnect became unbearable proof that the government no longer spoke for them. Then came the speech that changed everything. General Jacob Makanda, the head of Tanzania's armed forces, appeared on national television declaring, "The army will defend property, peace, and the stability of the state at all costs." It was both a warning and a declaration of war against the people. The phrase "at all costs" became the symbol of state brutality. Overnight, military checkpoints sprang up at every intersection. Soldiers searched cars, phones, and even pockets for signs of suspicious material. The city turned into a prison without walls. Yet out of fear came solidarity. In Dar es Salaam's working-class suburbs, neighbors opened their doors to strangers fleeing tear gas. In Mwanza, fishermen ferried protesters across Lake Victoria to safety. In Dodoma, priests and imams gathered in candlelight praying for justice and restraint. Even in silence, the resistance found its rhythm. The international reaction soon followed. Amnesty International released a statement condemning excessive and unlawful use of force. The European Union called the elections fraudulent and manipulated. The U.S. Embassy issued an alert urging Americans to avoid downtown areas. Across the border, Kenya sealed the town of Namanga after violent clashes left 2 people dead. The African Union remained quiet, a silence that many saw as complicity. In the days that followed, the contrast grew starker. Government officials congratulated themselves for restoring order, but in the neighborhoods, the word order meant bodies buried in silence. Hospitals overflowed, morgues ran out of space, and families received text messages from unknown numbers saying, "Only, we're sorry." And yet, amidst tragedy, something remarkable happened. Communities began organizing food drives, collecting donations for the wounded, and documenting abuses with hidden cameras. Artists painted murals of gas cylinders and burning barricades, transforming symbols of pain into icons of courage. By the end of that week, one truth had become undeniable. Tanzania had crossed a line it could never return from. The people had found their voice, and no amount of curfew, censorship, or fear could silence it again. When the smoke began to clear, Tanzania was no longer the same country. Shattered glass lined the sidewalks of Dar es Salaam, and the once bustling markets of Mwanza lay silent under the watch of soldiers. The curfew remained, but so did the defiance. The price of speaking out had been paid in blood, in fear, and in the shattering of illusions. For days, the government denied any wrongdoing. Officials described the protests as isolated disturbances, but eyewitnesses told another story, one of collective punishment. In working-class neighborhoods like Temeke and Magomeni, soldiers went door-to-door dragging men from their homes under accusations of incitement. Mothers wailed as their sons disappeared into unmarked trucks. Hospitals were overflowing, yet few dared to go. Security forces were rumored to arrest the wounded straight from the emergency rooms. Amid the terror, something fragile but powerful emerged: solidarity. Ordinary citizens, once divided by politics or tribe, now found common ground in shared pain. Volunteers organized food drives for families who had lost breadwinners. Teachers turned classrooms into makeshift shelters. Radio hosts whispered coded messages of safety during midnight broadcasts. In those small acts of humanity, Tanzania rediscovered the very spirit its politics had buried: the belief that the people are the nation. But the political fallout was seismic. President Samia Suluhu Hassan, once celebrated as Africa's first female Muslim head of state, now faced the deepest legitimacy crisis of her tenure. Her approval ratings collapsed domestically and abroad. The ruling party, CCM, a symbol of revolutionary heritage since 1961, suddenly looked less like a liberation movement and more like a monarchy in denial. Even within the party's inner circle, whispers began to surface: could this be the beginning of the end? The judiciary offered little comfort. Courts dismissed petitions from opposition lawyers, calling them inadmissible under emergency laws. The Electoral Commission, appointed by the president herself, announced victory margins of 95% in certain regions, drawing disbelief even among loyalists. For many, these numbers weren't statistics, they were insults. Economically, the consequences were devastating. Businesses shuttered, tourism collapsed, and investors fled. The Tanzanian shilling dropped sharply as trade routes through Kenya and Uganda froze under security restrictions. The internet blackout, initially meant to control the narrative, backfired, paralyzing financial systems, hospitals, and schools. What began as an election crisis had evolved into a national paralysis. In homes across the country, families sat in darkness, not because of power cuts, but because of grief. A father missing, a daughter in custody, a mother scrolling through messages that never delivered. The silence became unbearable, yet within that silence, courage grew. People started painting their doors blue, the color of gas cylinders, as a quiet act of resistance. "We will not be erased," one woman told an underground reporter. "Even if they shut our mouths, they cannot shut our memory." Internationally, the outrage continued to mount. But at home, the government tightened its grip. Dozens of journalists vanished, independent media outlets were blocked, opposition leaders remained imprisoned. Still, the protests had changed. Something fundamental: fear had shifted sides. For the first time in decades, the ruling elite, not the people, looked over their shoulders. The events of October 30th had done what decades of speeches could not. They had awakened a nation. And though the streets were quieter now, beneath the silence lay a single unstoppable question echoing through every home. If this is peace, what does justice look like? From Washington to Brussels, the images from Tanzania drew sharp breaths, but muted words. In the U.S., officials at the State Department issued a carefully worded statement urging restraint and dialogue. Behind closed doors, analysts debated whether calling out President Samia Suluhu Hassan too strongly might drive her government toward Russia or China. It was the same old calculation: stability over justice, partnership over principle. Yet for many Americans who still remember the struggles for civil rights, the images of unarmed citizens facing bullets stirred something deeper. In Europe, the reaction was louder but no less hollow. The European Union declared the election neither free nor fair, citing manipulation, voter intimidation, and censorship. But beyond condemnation, little action followed. Tanzania remains a strategic partner, a key trade corridor, a buffer for migration, and a quiet ally in regional security. The silence of global powers became another wound for those watching from the ground. "They see us bleed," one Tanzanian journalist said, "but they call it stability." Across Africa, however, the reaction was far more emotional and revealing. In Kenya, young people marched in solidarity outside the Tanzanian embassy carrying placards that read, "Your struggle is ours too." In Cameroon and Sudan Online, activists compared the scenes in Dar es Salaam to their own uprisings. A sense of continental kinship began to emerge, a realization that Africa's youth from Dakar to Addis Ababa were fighting the same enemy political systems that outlived their purpose. The crisis also sparked conversations about what kind of democracy Africa truly wants. For decades, Western nations have defined democracy as ballots, not accountability. But what Tanzania exposed is the gap between procedure and principle. Elections alone mean little when the outcome is predetermined and the dissenters are jailed. And so, as Tanzania's cities burned, the world was forced to confront a difficult question. Is this what democracy looks like when truth becomes optional? Meanwhile, leaders in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, members of the emerging AS alliance, publicly expressed sympathy for Tanzanians. In Ouagadougou, citizens gathered to honor the protesters who died, holding up posters of President Ibrahim Traore, whose model of sovereignty-driven governance stands in stark contrast to the stagnation of old regimes. State media in these countries broadcast the Tanzanian footage as a warning. This is what happens when leadership forgets the people. In the Global South, voices of resistance amplified. Independent media in India, Brazil, and South Africa drew parallels between Tanzania's blackout and their own histories of censorship. For the first time in years, Africa's internal crisis became a mirror reflecting the moral failures of the world order. Back in Washington, a quiet shift was underway. Policy advisors began drafting memos about youth-led instability across Africa, missing the point entirely. This was not instability. It was accountability. It was the echo of a generation that refuses to inherit fear. For those watching from afar, especially older Americans who once marched for justice in their own cities, Tanzania's struggle feels hauntingly familiar. The chants, the courage, the crackdown. They are reminders that democracy, whether in Alabama or Dar es Salaam, dies not with a gunshot, but with silence. And so the question now extends beyond borders. If the world can watch Tanzania burn and still look away, what does that say about us all? As the smoke slowly faded from the streets of Dar es Salaam, one truth lingered in the air. Tanzania had awakened. What began as anger over a stolen election had grown into something larger. A collective realization that silence, too, is a form of surrender. The government could cut the internet, but not the heartbeat of a people who had finally decided to stand. Across the country, the question that once whispered in fear now roared across rooftops. If not now, when? If not us, who? The faces of the fallen young men and women whose only weapon was courage became symbols of a deeper fight. Not just for votes, but for dignity, memory, and belonging. Mothers carried photographs of their sons like flags. Priests and imams prayed under curfew lights. Artists painted murals of blue gas cylinders, once mere containers of fuel, now eternal icons of defiance. But the danger is far from over. History shows that when power feels threatened, it often strikes harder. Already Tanzania's rulers have learned the playbook of fear, blackout, arrest, denial. Yet what they cannot extinguish is the spark they have ignited. Because once people lose everything, they lose fear itself. And that is where change begins. The lesson for the world, and especially for the United States, is unmistakable. Democracy cannot survive on ballots alone. It lives in the hearts of those willing to question authority, to tell the truth, and to protect the powerless. From Alabama to Arusha, the struggle is the same. Freedom means nothing if it does not belong to everyone. And for Africa, Tanzania's uprising is not a tragedy. It is a mirror, a reflection of what happens when leadership forgets its roots and when foreign applause replaces local accountability. Yet amid the ruins, there is hope, because somewhere between the silence of the state and the noise of the streets lies a new generation, unafraid, unbought, and unbroken. As the continent watches, the next chapter will not be written in government offices, but in the hearts of those who refuse to bow. Do you think this awakening will spread from Tanzania to every corner of Africa? Can we still trust leaders like President Samia Suluhu Hassan, or will it take new voices to restore faith in democracy? If you've followed this far, it means you care about truth, not just headlines. Please share this video if you believe that silence should never be the price of peace. Subscribe if you believe, like we do, that Africa's courage deserves the world's attention. Because in the end, it's not just Tanzania's story. It's the story of all who dare to say enough.